hard to stay focused. And I'm not good at staying focused anyway. It's a discipline that's really hard for me to accomplish. And so I'll need your help. If not your help, then your forbearance, because I believe I have something worth sharing today. And yet, if I don't do it justice, I'm hoping you find what is just in it and discard my inadequacies along the way. Yes, I need your help. I need your help to speak well, if not eloquently. I want to start with an image this morning. Sean Connery bleeding. He's bleeding in a movie that I'm watching with my son over the holiday. My college-age son comes home and he finds the couch right away, and the channel changer right after that. And there are so many old movies on, and he latches on to one of the Indiana Jones movies. Not the last one, but the one before that. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the search for the Holy Grail. And they're on the doorstep of this cave in the middle of the desert where they know the Grail to be. Henry Jones, played by Sean Connery, is the father of Indiana Jones. And they've already sent a soldier into the cave to find his way, and out came his head rolling back. Creepy. And so the evildoer number one, there are so many of them, I can only keep them straight by giving them numbers, tells Indiana Jones he has to go and get it because he knows the codes and the secrets. And he said, no, Indiana won't do it, and give it up to the evil Nazis. And so the evildoer number one, takes a gun and plugs one into Sean Connery, who now collapses over bleeding from his belly, and says, the only way to save him is to go and get that Holy Grail and heal your father. And so Indiana Jones goes into the cave, mindful of the decapitated head that has already rolled out. He reads the cryptic notes his father has acquired, and it says, only the penitent shall pass. Only the penitent, only the penitent, only the... I must kneel, and he kneels down just as the saw blade zip, slides by. We'll come back to that in just a moment. I want to leave you hanging. Those who know the movie know how it ends, but it's still exciting, isn't it? Every year, I follow the advice of someone you don't know, a fellow named Andy Stanley. He's one of those entrepreneurial megachurch pastors who has straight teeth and never wears a necktie. You know the type. I ain't that. Although I'm not wearing a necktie today, I am wearing Frederick Douglass today, and you'll know more about that in a moment. But he tells me in his little book, Making Vision Stick, that you have to reiterate the mission of your church regularly, at least twice a year. And I've taken that advice. Every September I remind us why we are here, to free minds and grow souls and to change the world. And every January I take a moment to imagine the future, how we can do this even better. And so I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to start with freeing the mind, hence the title of my sermon. 3 years ago, just to remind you, I didn't know how much impact I would have, but I suggested to you that we should start a second service. And we have, and we're in our third year, and while it's not hundreds of people, there are 40 or 50 people for whom that's their church. It's a ministry that has life. I suggested to you that we donate our Sunday offering to the community, and you've done that. In fact, the one thing I hear people brag about the most now is that we do that. The third thing was to make of our chapel a conscientiously welcoming place for all faiths. And we haven't gone there yet, but I'm kind of hoping we'll make some strides this year. But now those 3 projects are happening. I have to come up with 3 more, maybe more than that. In fact, I'm thinking even bigger than I did before, which is why it's kind of scary to talk about. That's why the Indiana Jones stuff is sticking in my head. In fact, I'm thinking ahead, not 3 years, but 6 years, because in 6 years, as you've heard me mention, we'll be marking our 150th anniversary, and I want us to have made some big decisions that will put us in a good place for the rest of the century. Now for my second story. This one's not about Indiana Jones. There's a very dark black man with very long dreadlocks, and he's sitting in my office about 20 years ago, a little less, 19 years ago. I'm a minister in Brooklyn. I've never met this man more than twice. He's really tall. He's really black. He has really long dreadlocks, and he has a voice that seems to come up out of the basement. He wants my advice about his marriage, and I haven't even met his wife. But he is describing the struggle they're having. I'm asking myself, why is he asking me this? He's describing her struggle with asthma. And then a little bell goes off in my head. And tentatively I say, it sounds like her physical illness is almost a symbol of your marital illness. And silence descended on my room. I was scared. Blow me away, he said. I'd never even thought of that. As though I'd lifted a curtain from part of his mind. That's what freeing the mind is like. When a curtain pulls back and something that was always there becomes evident and clear. My illustrious predecessor, Duncan Littlefair, tore curtains away left and right. Behold, look, here! And people were aghast, and people were charmed. We love it when we learn something new, when we have something presented to us that was always there that we had not noticed before or seen in just that way. Of course, when I have that experience, I don't think of Duncan Littlefair. I wasn't here then. I think of Johnny Nash. Who's Johnny Nash? I can see clearly now the rain is gone. It's a great song. Are we going to sing that later? We'll sing it later. Oh, great. Stick around for the postlude. You get to go along for the ride. Up there in one of those windows close by, I think it's that one up there, is Abraham Lincoln, who, as Ora Jones pointed out, is a movie star right now. Of course, he didn't feel like a movie star. In 1862, the war was going badly for the Union. They had lost a lot of battles, and his critics, and there were many, were saying, why are we making this war last so long? We should sue for peace. If you saw the movie, you know what I'm talking about. That there were those who were saying it's just killing men. There's no point in this war. We should find a negotiated peace. What did he do? Lincoln realized that the war had to have a purpose larger than bringing the Union back together. Listening to people like Frederick Douglass. I like Frederick Douglass because not only is he fierce and he's black, he's named Fred. And I grew up with a world thinking Fred was associated with Flintstones, so I take all the Freds I can get. And Frederick Douglass, not only him, but notably him, was pushing the president to declare something that was out there but hadn't been accepted, that this war was not just to save the Union, but to abolish slavery itself, the cause of the rebellion. And in the summer of 1862, he thought, that's what I'm going to do. And he began to fashion the Emancipation Proclamation, knowing that there were people who would bolt from his party, bolt from the government, might even bolt from the Union itself if he came out for abolition. But he put it together anyway. And on January 1st, 1863, 150 years ago this week, the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, which is the first document in American history that said slavery must go. It was a daring act. The Danish theologian Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. That was Lincoln's dilemma. Failure to take the action would have meant the loss of the moral urgency of the war, and yet the dare and the danger was very, very real. Speaking of losing your footing, I left Indiana Jones on the far side of the decapitating saw. Now he realizes there's a floor full of tiles, and if he steps on the wrong one, he could plummet to his death. And he discerns from the cryptic notes his father has made that he should spell out the name of God, Jehovah. So he steps on the letter J, and falls and clings to the edge because Jehovah is in Latin spelled with an I. Even when you know the truth, you may make the wrong step anyway. Even when you are aware of the truth, you may make the wrong choice even based on that truth. We have to be careful that just because the truth sets us free doesn't mean we're not free just to go over a cliff and fall into the abyss. It's more work after you've been liberated than before. We need only look at the history of race in America to know that it's taken a century and a half to undo a century and a half of slavery. We still have 250 more years of slavery to undo. And how long will that take? Well, not long, it says, or too long. I need to speak some truth about us today. Let's start with a truth that many of you know and many of you don't. And I don't like truths that are not shared. I have been here almost 8 years now, and the reason I'm here is because my predecessor did not succeed, Brent Smith, a gentleman I knew. We are socially acquainted. We went to the same school. We shared a district together. And I don't want to talk about him particularly as that moment in our past, because that did not work out between you. You both thought you knew the code. You stepped on a bad tile and dangled. And we've been cleaning up ever since. Much of the last decade has been regaining our footing. There were dark clouds. Even if we can't see clearly now, most of them are in the background, but there is a lingering caution. You know what happens? You fall down, you get bruised, you get up, and you walk very gingerly for some time. You don't take the same risks you took automatically before. I understand that. It's very natural. But at some point, we are in Kierkegaard's position. We either lose our footing or lose ourself. Having survived now 2 deadly threats, Indiana Jones comes to the end of the tunnel. Do you remember what happens there? He sees a great abyss in front of him and the door to the Grail across this abyss, an insurmountable distance. He looks at his notes, hoping to find a solution. The notes say, "Only in the leap of faith will he prove his worth."